Nancy Pelosi 这一次的亚洲之行，她去了新加坡，接着去了马来西亚，一个很靠近的地方，缅甸正在处决4名伟大的民主斗士，他没有对这个事情发声，所以有的人说他不再是1989年天安门事件时刻的 Nancy Pelosi， 你到底是反中还是你是支持人权？但我们看他的一生是支持人权。可是或许他当到议长以后，他跟年轻时代的他并不是那么完全相同。您还记得缅甸吗？ Nancy Pelosi 忘了，他即使来到非常靠近缅甸的旁边，他还是忘记了缅甸的民主。缅甸在他上一次政变2021年2月1号政变1年又5个月，在国际几乎对他好像可以任由军政府军事政变随便抓人、随便杀人、随便关人，翁山书记也还被关的情况里头，外界没有给予太多的任何关注，不要讲支持的情况之下，他处决正式判了4名政治犯死刑。这4名政治犯呢，判处死刑是1988年来缅甸首次以死刑来处理反对人士。
你还记得缅甸吗？我们还记得，在军政府夺权1年又5个月之后，于7月25日宣布处决了4名民主派人士的消息。
What's the point of my life? Sang Myanmar's most famous rapper, seen here stage right. Pusa Tor found the point as an activist and politician. He campaigned for democracy and became an MP. But today his life was taken from him, one of 4 political prisoners executed by the country's military junta. State TV said he was a terrorist. The opposition and his mother see him as a martyr.
The mom of Posiato said one word: I am so proud of my son for sacrificing his life, laying down his life for freedom and democracy and for human rights. Just imagine that. So that's who he is. That's who he stands for. That's what he stands for.
Another well-known democracy activist, Kyaw Min-yu, known as Ko Jimmy, was also killed in the first executions for half a century.
They were sentenced in closed-door trials earlier this year after being accused of helping militias to fight the army that seized power in a coup last year.
Both lost their appeals against their sentences in June. The 2 others executed were La Miu Ong and Ong Duyazo.
A sign that the junta that seized power last year will brook no dissent.
The junta is despised by most people. They have no support among the population in Myanmar to speak of. And so I think this is an attempt at instilling greater fear and intimidation against the population. If they can't rule by the consent of the people of Myanmar, which they obviously cannot, then they're going to try to terrify them even more than they have to this point. So I think the message for the people inside the country is that no one is safe. There is no limit to what we will do to those who continue to oppose us.
Nonetheless, a few brave protesters came out onto the streets of Yangon today with banners saying, "We will never be frightened," and filmed themselves so the world can see even the prospect of execution will not cow them.
In neighboring Thailand, hundreds gathered in front of the Myanmar embassy in Bangkok, hands held high in a 3-finger salute, a defining symbol of resistance to military rule. For the US, there can no longer be business as usual for Myanmar leaders.
We urge all countries to ban the sale of military equipment to Burma, to refrain from lending the regime any degree of international credibility, and we call on ASEAN to maintain its important precedent, only allowing Burmese non-political representation at regional events.
ASEAN chair Cambodia has called the timing of the executions highly reprehensible, ahead of a meeting of foreign ministers next week. Myanmar's foreign minister is not invited to the meeting, and with these executions, that isolation has deepened.
Takes place about less than 2 weeks after the special envoy visited Naypyidaw, and just about a week before the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Phnom Penh. So we look at it that as if the junta is making a mockery of the 5-point consensus, and I think we really have to look at this very, very seriously.
各国的谴责，军政府听到了，这是他们的回应。
ဒီတရားခံတွေကိုကျွန်တော်တို့ခုခံခြေပခွင့်ကျွန်တော်ပေးခဲ့ပါတယ်။နံပါတ်1ကျွန်တော်တို့ဒါခုခံခြေပခွင့်ပေးခဲ့ပါတယ်။ပြီးရင်တက်တဲ့အထောက်အထားအပြည့်အစုံပေါ်အခြေပြုဆုံးဖြတ်ခဲ့ခြင်းလည်းဖြစ်ပါတယ်။ဒါပြည်တွင်းဥပဒေပြဋ္ဌာန်းချက်များနဲ့အညီစစ်ဆေးစီရင်ပြီးပြည်ထောင်အတည်ပြုချမှတ်ဆောင်ရွက်ခဲ့တဲ့ကိစ္စနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးဒါဝေဖန်မှုတွေကန့်ကွက်မှုတွေဖြစ်ပေါ်လာနိုင်တယ်ဆိုတာကျွန်တော်တို့သိပါတယ်။သူတို့ကျူးလွန်ခဲ့တဲ့ပြစ်မှုတွေကအခြားသေဒဏ်ချမှတ်ခြင်းခံရတဲ့ပြစ်မှုတွေနဲ့နှိုင်းယှဉ်ရင်သေဒဏ်ကိုအကြိမ်ကြိမ်ကြခံတိုက်တဲ့ကျူးလွန်တဲ့ပြစ်မှုတွေဖြစ်တယ်
As I mentioned, there are now 140, at least 140 people who are on death row. These are the first executions that have been carried out by Myanmar in decades, and so it is. There's every indication that the military junta intends to continue to carry out the executions of those on death row as it continues to bomb villages and detain innocent people throughout the country.
Last February, after democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi won a landslide election victory, the military staged a coup. She's now in prison. After soldiers suppressed widespread protests, many activists fled into exile and others into the bush. Now, peaceful resistance has turned to armed rebellion. They call themselves the People's Defence Forces. Footage from tonight's dispatches that's never been seen before shows a graduation ceremony for new fighters in central Myanmar. An army helicopter launches an airstrike, and both the recruits and the camera crew have to take cover. The military has also launched aerial and ground attacks on villages. There are widespread reports of the wounding and killing of civilians by Myanmar soldiers. This is a cruel and rarely seen civil war. Today's executions are a sign of how much more cruel it's set to become.